Okay, good afternoon. So this time we're looking at Laurie Paul's book, Transformative Experience. Can you put your hand up if you had a chance to look at any rate, the first chapter of this? And if you liked it? If you didn't like it? Okay. What were your reservations? Sorry? That we've already looked at? Wow. Okay, well, my task today is to... well, this is Laurie Paul. The next two classes, we'll look at this book, and I will try to convince you it adds a lot, actually. This is a brand new book. It's just coming out in November, so this is like a preview of it. And I think that what I like so much about what she is doing is that it connects lots of the questions that we're talking about to things that actually matter for practical decision making in everyday life. It also has the best opening sentence of any philosophy book I know. Does anyone have it there? What is the opening sentence? Yeah, imagine what it would be like for you to be a vampire. Well, I wish I'd written that as the opening sentence of a book. Okay. So the issues that come up here get pretty complex, and I want to start out with a very simple kind of exercise in thinking about these things. So she is talking about pretty complex decisions, pretty complex judgments about what to do and how to behave. So I want to start out with a much simpler case, which is physical pain. Physical pain is important, right? Whether someone else is feeling pain, whether you're feeling pain, that matters for what you do next. No, I hear you cry. That can't be right. Surely that one is right. Bentham said about animals, the question is not can they reason or can they talk, but can they suffer? If animals can feel physical pain, then that matters for what you can do with them. If it hurts the fish when you stick a hook through it, then that matters for whether it's okay to go fishing. So pain is just important. Avoiding pain is important. Helping people who are in pain is important. That's a really basic thing. I take it we're all on board with that. So some of the things I say in this class are quite controversial, but that one is meant to be about as basic as we can get. Put up your hand if you fully agree with everything I just said. Okay. So the next question is, how do you know that's right? Where does it come from, that knowledge of pain mattering? I mean, sorry? Your own experience. Yeah, well, your own experience must be where we start, right? Someone causes you pain and you think, that was terrible, right? I don't want that again. But after all, other people might quite like it. And maybe there are other times you would quite like it. If it was just your own current experience you had to go on, then really it wouldn't take you beyond saying that this is terrible right here and now. But what I said was quite general. If someone else is in pain, that's awful too. So how do you know? You see the person there in agony. How do you know that that's awful? How do you know that's something you need to stop? Well, as I say, I want to take this very slowly, because every step here gets weight put on it when you think about the more complex cases. I think, I'm not dead sure about this, but I think the reason it seems so obvious that pain is awful is that you imagine it. Your own current pain matters, not just because it's clear to you that that's awful, but because it's the basis for your ability to imagine other people's pain. So that if you're experiencing agony, then what makes it so clear to me that something ought to be done about is that I can get in there. I can imagine how the world is from your point of view. And the point about that kind of imaginative exercise is that if I imagine this happening to you, that mobilizes all my other emotions. That mobilizes my concern. That mobilizes all the practical stuff that I would do to get myself out of pain. And if you didn't have that ability to imagine someone else's pain, well, Kant or your mom or a pastor or whoever your moral authority is might tell you, well, pain is very bad, you ought to do something about pain. But there would be something kind of intellectual about it, right? I mean, it would be something kind of abstract, and you're just taking their word for it if you believe that pain is awful. It's only that we take this ability to imagine other people's pain for granted. We take it for granted all the time. But that's what makes it so apparent to us that pain is awful. If you had someone who you could have pain, but you just couldn't imagine other people's pain, then it really would be a question for you. Is it so dreadful? You might say, the last couple of mine that I can remember, they weren't much fun. But really, what about most cases? I don't know. It's because you have this imaginative capacity that you know that pain is awful. All right so far? Yes? Yes. If you have a high pain, someone who has a high pain tolerance is going to imagine they're going to be less sympathetic. Yes. Yeah. That may be kind of what you'd expect, wouldn't it? That if someone isn't affected much by pain, if their pain sensibility is blunted, then they wouldn't be that good at empathizing with other people's pain. Is that your suggestion? Yeah. I think you'd expect that, yeah. Well, isn't that right? So that if your capacity to imagine other people's pain was affected for whatever reason, your level of concern about the pain would go down. Yeah? So watch me very closely here. Is this correct? I mean, we've just talked so far about imaginative understanding of other people as if it was just something you did for its own sake, as if it was just something you did because you were kind of interested in other people. But this is the first place you start to see why it's important, why it practically matters. So, if you have two people here, one of whom is feeling pain, and I'm not quite sure what the opposite of pain is, but I take serenity to involve, well, I don't know, I mean, could you combine serenity and pain? I couldn't myself, but if you tell me that your meditation class has taught you how to do it, then okay. But let's suppose we have a pain-free serenity. On the other hand, well, what I'm saying is your imaginative understanding that engages your emotions on behalf of one person rather than the other. That's what imaginative understanding connects to practical action and engagement with other people. So suppose that this is time, this is you right now, and this is great pain on the left, and this is a kind of pain-free serenity on the right. You can imagine the position of the person on the left. You can imagine the position of the person on the right. Which is better, the position of the person on the left or the position of the person on the right? Let there be no secrets between us. It is the position of the person on the left that is worse, right? Okay? And you know that because of your imaginative understanding of those two states. Well, suppose now that you're told that one of these people is going to be you. This is you in an hour's time. One of these is you. Well, is there a special kind of imaginative understanding that you have of your own future states that you don't have of anyone else's? future states. I call that projection, if it exists. That's to say, when you put yourself into the position of this person in an hour's time, it makes a difference to the exercise you're doing, whether you think that one's me or if you think that one's not me. It's a different kind of exercise. So what I'm suggesting is there's a special kind of imaginative understanding that you have if you're saying that one's me. If you're told, I don't know, let's suppose in an hour's time you're going to be at the dentist has run out of anesthetic, the thing just can't be put off, you've got to have this done right now. Right? Then the way your emotions are engaged is actually quite different to the way your emotions are engaged if you were told it was going to be someone else. Projection is going to be what engages emotions like fear or apprehension or relief or maybe pride if it's a pain that you're happy to go through, that you're proud to go through with. Projection will be a special kind of imaginative understanding that you have of your own future self. And it mobilizes lots of different emotions in different ways than imaginative understanding of someone that you know to be a different person. How about that? So I say there's imaginative understanding in general, and then there's this special thing, projection, that is what you do with your future self. And now, suppose you're given a choice. This is you on the left. Then, that's the pain, and on the right, someone else is feeling serene. Now, that's, if you look at it objectively, if you look at it from an impersonal point of view, then what's going on in that scenario is no better or worse than what's going on in this scenario. Yeah? Because everybody's feeling just the same amount of pain or serenity. But look at that. Both these cases, right? But nonetheless, if you're like a regular person, you'd feel a quite different set of emotions contemplating this scenario than you would contemplating that scenario. If you look at this scenario, then you experience fear, apprehension, terror, panic. Your very reason is unseated, and you have a certain what's the word I want? What's the word for what you feel about the guy who's feeling serene? Indignation, remorse. Right. Okay. Whereas here, you don't feel any of those things. You don't feel fear or apprehension. You may feel sympathy or pity for the guy who's going to experience the pain. That's a quite different set of emotions. Right? So your projective understanding is engaging different emotions to just regular imaginative understanding. So if you're given the choice, if I pull down the switch, I'll get this scenario. And if I push the switch up, I'll get that scenario. Then is that a hard question or is that an easy question? Up or down? Easy. Is that easy or hard? Easy. I say it's easy. I don't think any of us would have any trouble with that at all. I mean, too bad about the other guy, but there you go. I mean, into each life a little rain must fall. Right? Because quite different emotions are being mobilized. Now, the key point here is it's only because your emotions are being engaged that you have any idea what to do. If you were looking at this purely objectively, without any emotional engagement, you would know what to do. Not everything would seem just as good as everything else. It's only because these things like fear and so on get caught up here that there's a difference between one scenario and another. But the reason I'm focusing in this case is so simple, it's so clear exactly what's going on, that you can see the mechanics of it, that for all of us, our ordinary emotional engagement would make us push a lever that way rather than this. So what's projection? I said what's going on here is that a different kind of imaginative understanding that you have of your own future self, and call that projection. Does projection require that you use the word I? I mean, last time we were talking about simulation and the idea that simulating another person is one thing, using your own box and arrow structure to mimic someone else's box and arrow structure, that's one thing, and thinking about them, conceptually identifying what states they're in, that's a different thing. That's a much fancier, more sophisticated thing. So one way of thinking of what's going on here is that when you project yourself into the future serene self, what you're doing is using your own box and arrow structure to mimic your own future self, and then offline seeing what happens. Would that mean you've got to think of that person as I? I mean, one way you could think of it is, I can project. Projection is something different to imaginative understanding in general, and whatever it is, it doesn't mean that I have to use concepts like I. And then okay. Fear, apprehension. Okay. Yeah. So one scenario is that there's this basic capacity to project. It's a special variety of imaginative understanding. And then when you're using the word I, that's like your name for whoever it is whose situation you're projecting into. I is just what I call that thing, that person into whose future states I project myself. Another way of thinking of it is, no, I is basic. Unless you knew what I meant, unless you knew that there was such a thing as yourself, you wouldn't be able to make the distinction between projective imagining and just imaginative understanding in general. It's because it's me that I'm feeling fear. It's not that the fear comes first and I say, I'll tag with I, whoever it is I'm feeling fear on behalf of. You see what I mean? There are these two different ways of thinking of this. Any comment on that? Yes? Doesn't projection mean you're thinking of it as me? That's what the second view says. Projection is just thinking of it as me. But just as you could feel empathy with another person without classifying, you could feel empathy with Sally without classifying her as Sally. Do you see what I mean? Without having any... That's right. I'm saying when it is you, there are different emotions and so on being engaged. Now, the second one there says, that's because I'm identifying that person as me. The other way to think of it is that there's a more primitive thing, and maybe this isn't comprehensible, if you see what I mean. Maybe in the end this doesn't make sense. But what I want to try out is there might be a way of a distinctive kind of imaginative understanding that doesn't involve using I yet, that you can do with future states. So two animals that don't talk about I, don't talk about the self. One of them could nonetheless be feeling fear or apprehension or anxiety, having pictured a future state that it wouldn't do if it was picturing someone else's future state. Yeah. And then you can say to it, that one you care about so much there, we use I to talk about that one. You see what I mean? These are different models of what's going on. Right. Anything else on that? Yep. That's a wonderful question. Of course, you're right. Just in this case, yeah. When I was asking you what kind of scenario would you prefer, one of these situations has to be hypothetical. Yeah. So it's got to be you can project into hypothetical situations. You see what I mean? So yeah, it hadn't occurred to me to make that point, but that's great. That it's only going to be of any use, projection, in practical decision making if you can project into different hypothetical future situations. Yeah. Does that answer your question? Yeah, great. Anything else? Okay, so this is just following on in that last comment. You could think of you said this is future and this is hypothetical. It covers the future and it covers hypothetical selves. But you could also think about projection into the past. When you think back on past events in your life and think how proud you are of that moment or how ashamed or embarrassed you are about that emotion, about that moment, when you remember something happening to you, specifically to you, then all these emotions get called up that don't get called up just when you're thinking about someone else. If it was you that slapped that waiter or you that saved someone's life, these are different emotions you feel than if you remember this happening to someone different. That kind of projection into the past, you could raise the same question about it. If I remember the incidents that happened from the inside, I remember being there, I remember being in the thick of things when it all started to happen, then I have all these emotions connected, being brought up. I wish I'd done something differently. I'm so proud I did that. I'm so ashamed I did that. It can also happen that someone tells you what you did. They say, you really don't remember. I hope I'm not the only one this happens to. They say, you really don't remember what you did last night? You did this, and then you did this, and then you did this. And you're thinking, I wish I was dead. And there, it's not actually memory. Someone else is telling you, but you project into the past in a way that calls up all these distinctive emotions again. So I don't know. I mean, one possibility is that projecting into the past doesn't actually involve using I or something like that. When you remember, actually, if I just remember all these scenes from back then, I'm just getting the scene, if you see what I mean, and I'm remembering myself in the thick of it. I'm not necessarily identifying myself at all. I just remember being in the thick of it all. And then I say, well, I'll call that guy I. I'll say that's me. But if someone else is telling you what you did, it seems like you've got to use I to arouse those emotions, to engage those emotions. Something like that. We're going to come back to this kind of question again and again, but I just want to start it here. Any comments on that? Yep. I didn't mean to be drawing any distinction there.
Okay.
Using I, calling some person I, just meant that's the same thing. Yeah.
Okay. So are there two different ways of identifying yourself here?
Well, what I was thinking was, if a ball comes towards you and you duck, right? You didn't need to think that's coming towards me. Yeah. An animal that's not self-conscious at all will still duck or get out of the way if you throw something at it. There's that kind of basic. You're in the world, you're reacting to things in the world. You feel fear when the ball comes towards you, but not because you thought of anything as I. It was at some more basic animal level than that. And what I was wondering about, one thing I think is really interesting about imaginative understanding, or in this case projection, is how fancy a business is it? Is it a complicated conceptual thing that only we as inhabitants of a late industrial civilization can really do? Or is it something that any animal can do? Is it something that hedgehogs can do and dolphins can do and so on? And it doesn't even require a language, let alone any special concepts. Yeah. So if you thought of projection like that, as that really ground floor thing that anybody can duck, can lightly project, you see what I mean? Because if you couldn't project, then why would you duck? Right? Something like that. But without using I, that would be one way to think of it. Another way to think of this would be this is quite a fancy conceptual thing that really only very sophisticated creatures like you and me can do. Yeah. Yep. Yes. Even if you don't remember the exact event. That's right, yeah. 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 You know how sometimes you wake up with a kind of free-floating sense of guilt? And it takes you a while to pin down. Maybe someone has to tell you. Is that the kind of thing? I don't mean you do this, but... yeah. Yeah. Oh, the memory of the emotion. Oh, you mean the memory of the emotion as you felt it at the time? Is that what you mean? Yeah. Yeah. That's not how I was thinking of it, but that's interesting. So you're saying when you have this emotion regarding your past self, yeah, it had to be that you felt that emotion at the time, yeah, and then you're just recovering it, and that's how the emotion gets engaged. That is really interesting because that would be a big difference between memory and the future, right? Because when your future pain is engaging the fear and apprehension, that can't be happening because of your future emotions, if you see what I mean. Casting their shadow back in the future or something, that makes no sense. Yeah? But I guess I wonder if it's true. Suppose you think of Harry Potter, as I do. Suppose you think of Harry after it's all done, right? After all the adventures, right? You remember the battles, the struggles, yeah? And he feels some quiet satisfaction and yet tinged with sadness. Let us suppose that all that, right? Did he feel quiet satisfaction at the time? No, at the time he was blazing away with his wand or whatever it was. You see what I mean? He wasn't feeling any of those reflective emotions at all. It's only later, when he looks back, that kind of emotion kicks in. You see what I mean? Yeah. So I wonder if it's true in general. I mean, sometimes, I agree, sometimes it can happen. You step up to receive the winner's medal at the Olympics and, yes, and, a year later you remember and it's just the same emotion. But I think often it's not like that. Yeah. Yeah. True fear, yes, right. Yes.
But I still haven't experienced it. Can I take that description of something else's fear and project it onto the new person?
I think that's quite a good description. Couldn't you? I think you could. You're feeling just like... Sorry?
Does projection require that it's my own experience or the emotion? Or can I take somebody else's experience?
Oh, I see what you mean. Well, I guess what I was thinking with projection is... Projection is when it relates to me, to one and the same person, yeah. But it needn't be an emotion I've already felt. You see what I mean? Maybe I've never felt physical pain, or at any rate, it's a different point. Let's see. Suppose I've never felt jealousy, yeah. But my friend Bill is going through the mill. My friend Bill suffers agonies. Yeah, I've been with him. I know what's going on. Yeah, he spends 2 or 3 hours every day telling me about it. Yeah, I empathize. I'm right there. So it's not my jealousy. I've never felt it. But still, when someone says to you, you're setting yourself up for this.
But how can it be your empathy if you've never felt it? Like, how can you have an imagination or understand
Yeah.
what it's like to be jealous if I've never felt it?
Yeah. There are lots of different cases here. I give jealousy, see, with colour, like Mary and colour, then it's very plausible. If you didn't have the experience, you couldn't imagine it. Yeah. Jealousy is, I was using jealousy because that's the kind of case where you might think, even if I didn't have that exact experience, I could imagine it. You see what I mean? You just say, well, remember when you were 3 and Billy took your cookies? That wasn't really jealousy exactly. Not the way a grown-up feels it, but it kind of gets you there. You see what I mean? You have enough of a context to imagine what that might be like. Yeah, even though you haven't experienced that exact thing. Yeah, so there's lots of complexity here. But what I meant was that kind of thing is a different phenomenon from projection in this sense, where however you're getting on to what pain is, whether it was from your own experience or someone else's, the key thing is whose pain is it that you're envisaging? Yeah. Feeling that you got mad at someone, yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you can get enough to get a fix on it. So this is what they were all talking about. Is it something like that? Is that what you mean? Yeah. Yeah. Right. And that seems quite different to something like the bat or Mary and colour experience, where what you're trying to imagine is so far out of your ordinary range that you just can't do it. Yeah. That's an important distinction. Yeah. Okay? Oh, yes, good. Yeah. Every time I call someone in this class, they look round. Projection to the present. Yeah, that's a really interesting question, actually, because you do know about your own current mental states. Yeah? Isn't that the truth? Yeah, you try and grab the moment, but no, it just keeps rolling ceaselessly on. But I don't know, the thing about my mental life is, you may find this as you get older, it gets kind of sluggish. Mine doesn't go that fast. So although the river rolls, it doesn't roll too fast anymore. When I look inside my own mental life, I don't get a whole lot of movement. And if you ask me, is that a kind of projection? I'm really not sure. Projection sounds... somehow I seem closer to my own mental life than projection suggests. But on the other hand, when you think about cases where people get it wrong about their own mental lives, where people say things like, well, I'm very shy, even though it's manifestly not true, you think, well, they're projecting into their own mental lives, but just not doing it very well. Yeah, they're subject to the same kinds of error that they are when they're thinking about other people's mental lives. But if you think about just knowing that you're feeling pain, it's hard to think of that as projection. That seems so immediate, and how could you be wrong about that? Yeah. So I just think there's an issue there that you're raising. I don't have a sharp answer to that. I don't have I know a sharp answer, but I don't know which one is right. Okay. Okay. So Laurie Paul's, one of Laurie Paul's key points is you naturally and intuitively want to make your life choices by thinking about what you care about and what your future experiences will be like if you decide to undergo the experience. That's why you're expected to weigh evidence from your own personal perspective and decide how you want to apply it to your situation. So, when you're making practical judgments about your own future life, you want to be doing it using imaginative understanding, using projection. That's what she's saying. When you're making big decisions about your future life, you should be doing it using projection. That's why this is important. That's why it seems worth going over this simple example so carefully. Here's the example she opens the book with. Suppose that all your friends, people whose interests, views, and lives were similar to yours, have already decided to become vampires, and all of them tell you that they love it. They describe their new lives with unbridled enthusiasm and encourage you to become a vampire too. I thought at this point we should have a picture, but I looked it up in the web and I thought maybe we won't have a picture. Your friends say things like, I'd never go back, even if I could. Life has a meaning and a sense of purpose now that it never had when I was human. I feel like I understand reality in a way I just couldn't before. It's amazing. But I can't really explain it to you, a mere human. You have to be a vampire to know what it's like. So suppose you're given that choice. How do you decide? Suppose that's your call. You only get it once. You've got to decide right now. How do you make the call? The way we did it with these two scenarios, pain and serenity, was you imaginatively project yourself into the future condition. And you say, well, wow, that one's a lot worse than this one. This one looks better, right? I imaginatively project in. So now you've got these two scenarios. One where you're going to be a vampire, the other where you're going to be a regular person, and you try to project in. But can you do the projection? No, the case has been very carefully set up, so you can't do the projection. You can't possibly imagine what that will be like. So you have no way of making that decision. How could you make the decision? You can't do it in the same way we did in the simple case. So you don't have the basis for making the call. You can't imaginatively project into the situation of the vampire, and once you're a vampire anyway, your preferences as to what seems like a good thing if you become a vampire, that may all change in ways that you couldn't predict right now, ways that are just unknowable to you right now. So this way of making a decision that seems so easy and straightforward here is just blocked in this vampire kind of case. You can't imagine. This is what she's calling a transformative experience. It is one that changes who you are. So you have no rational basis for opting in or opting out. You can't imaginatively project into it. And once you are in that situation, your preferences might change in ways that you can't predict and can't even comprehend at this stage. So then you might say, well, all right, don't use imaginative understanding. I mean, the whole contrast to this class is imaginative understanding on the one hand and scientific explanation on the other. So you might say it's just a mistake anyway to be using scientific understanding of projection. That's just a handy way of doing things, but you don't have to do it like that. You could change the way you make the decision. This is Laurie Paul. So the new deliberation does not rely on your expectations about what it would be like for you to have the experience. It relies solely on impersonal facts about how people in general respond to those kinds of experiences. So you could replace imaginative projection with scientific data. So you might look up a report, a newspaper report. Vampires tend to report feeling greater feelings of satisfaction and well-being than do corresponding regular people. Their general health tends to be better. They report more cavities. Their educational level tends to be somewhat disappointing. They do better at winter sports. So you could look you could look up a list like that and say, how will I do better? Will I do better in this checklist if I'm a vampire than if I'm a regular person? But that would be a really strange, alien way to make the decision. This is what Paul said. You naturally and intuitively want to make your life choices by thinking about what you care about and what your future experience will be like if you decide to undergo the experience. I mean, what I began by saying was, even for something as basic as physical pain, you need imaginative understanding even to grasp why physical pain matters at all. So if you need it even for getting the practical significance of physical pain, then why should you think you could do without imaginative understanding in this kind of case? I mean, vampires, that's obviously a kind of issue that comes up fairly, it's fairly unusual for that to come up. But what about coming to Berkeley? I mean, can you put your hand up? Did you know, could you have imagined what Berkeley would be like before you got here? Did you have it pretty cold? Put your hand up if you knew pretty well what Berkeley would be like before you got here. And if you couldn't imagine what it would be like before you got here, wow, okay, there you go. So how could you make the decision? That was a decision you were trying to make when you were looking at all those application forms and so on. You were saying, what's it going to be like? And you have the answer, I just don't know. Or take another example Laurie gives. Suppose you're wondering whether to have a child. Suppose you face this question. Well, you could use the scientific data. Across the board, the highs seem to be higher for parents, the lows seem to be lower, and many measures suggest parents with children in the home, especially mothers of young children, have lower levels of subjective well-being. Moreover, people who've never had children report similar levels of life satisfaction as individuals with grown children who've left home. Well, you could do it like that. You're wondering, should I have a child? Would that be a good idea? Is that what I want? I can't imagine what it will be like. I can't get there. I mean, what is that going to be like? That seems completely, that's just on the other side of something. So you could use a checklist. Imagine Sally, who's always believed that having a child would bring her happiness and fulfillment. But she decides not to have a child because the empirical evidence tells her she will maximize her expected value by remaining childless. You look at the data, yeah? Individuals who've never had children report similar levels of satisfaction as individuals with grown children who've left home. Well, so that's goodbye to a dream. Yeah, you look at the empirical data. That's not how any of us make these decisions, or at any rate, you'd be very unusual if you made a decision in that way, and people would think you are weird. I mean, I'm not saying that damns it, but the fact is people would think you were weird if you made a decision that way. Yeah? You try to imagine, what will life be like this if I do that? What will life be like if I do that? But then, when we have these transformative experiences, whether it's coming to Berkeley or having a child or wherever, you can't use your imaginative projection. That stops working. You can't get into that situation. So the basic puzzle is, how do you make the decision? If you're not going to do it by way of a scientific checklist, and you're not going to do it by way of imaginative understanding. I actually mean that as a question. If you see what I'm... Yes, good. Flip a coin, very good. Yeah, that's right. Welcome to the world, young Benjamin Zephaniah. We flipped the coin and you're in. Right. Again, you could do it that way. That would give you a result at any rate, which is greatly in its favour. But what we're looking for is a rational basis. Yeah, something that's not flipping a coin. Yeah, yeah. Decide whether or not... Oh, right. But what will it be like if I install the update? Right. Well, that somehow lowered the tone. Yeah, 1, 2. Yeah. Who've done the thing? Yeah, get to know people who've got children, see how it is for them. Yeah, that's very good. Yeah, that would try to catapult you into it. Yeah, That would try and make it so that it wasn't just this on the other side kind of thing. Yeah, yeah. It might happen, I mean this is a practical possibility. It might happen that you try that strategy and it just doesn't work. You just can't get what they're doing. You see what I mean? 1, 2. Yeah. I use what? Empirical data. You would use empirical data. Yeah. Okay. I do. That's obviously got a lot to be said for it. Next time I'll come on to what Laurie Paul thinks are the real deep problems with doing that. But well, I guess the point for now is just if you use that data that seems to suggest having children won't improve your general levels of satisfaction, that's not how most people approach the decision. Yes, right, you individually. Okay. Okay. That's a very good point, and we want to discuss that next time, right? Yeah. Excellent. Yeah, what you gain from the experience. Okay, yeah. So you might not know about it now, but you'll know about it then. Yeah. Yeah. I agree, and actually I think something like that is what Laurie Paul is pushing for in the end. Though, I mean, my immediate reaction to that is, if it's just kind of curiosity that's leading you to do those things, wow, now I'll know what it's like having a child. You see what I mean? Well, so often with those decisions, what you're doing is you're blocking off one thing. So this is what it's like going to Berkeley, but I'll never know what it would have been like going to Stanford. You see what I mean? Yeah. Yeah. And it's also true that for many of these decisions, that thing about curiosity would lead you in one direction rather than the other. Yeah, you'll learn more going down one track than going down the other. Yeah. And I think that's just very important. Yeah. It just seems so sad never to have found out about this. Yeah, is that the idea? Yeah. I actually think that's... Yeah. I think that's very close to Laurie Paul's own diagnosis in the book. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. 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 Yeah. Yeah. There's something about what kind of person you want to be that seems to me very important. It seems to me important in the other side with children too. I mean, it struck me very much. A friend of mine once said to me the reason she wanted to have children was that she didn't want to spend her whole life being focused on herself. She wanted to be forced to be pulled out of herself and have to care about other people. And that doesn't really fit here because it's a desire to be transformed. You're really thinking of someone. On the other hand, you might think, I don't want to be transformed. Right? I'm fine the way I am. Yeah. And these both seem to be legitimate paths. Okay, so these are all actually great lines to pursue, and we'll pursue them in the next couple of sessions. Okay, thanks, guys.